Hey, everybody, welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast presented by Wonderful Pistachios. I am Chris Peters from FloHockey. He is Cam Robinson from Elite Prospects. Cam, it is springtime, and we are, well, not officially, but it's close enough, and things are starting to percolate a little bit in the hockey world. Cam, how the heck are you?
I'm great, buddy. I'm great. I mean, the kids are off school. March Madness was on TV this morning. Like that took me back, a little throwback. Regular hockey's winding down. Spring hockey's kicking off. The scouting season's going. Like this is good. The birds are chirping a little bit. I'm in a good place. How about you, man? How you doing?
Yeah, it's sunny. It's beautiful. I feel like my entire mood is shifting as the weather gets a little bit warmer. And boy, I'll tell you what, it is one of my favorite times of the year. And we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk a lot of college hockey today because there is a lot of that happening. We are in the conference. As we're recording this is right before the conference tournaments. The NCAA tournament field will be decided by Saturday of this week. So we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about the tournament itself, but definitely about some of the top contending teams. Also, the Hobey Baker top 10 was announced. But we're going to start today. And we're going to start today with a major topic, something that you wrote about on Elite Prospects, something that we've talked about on this podcast before. But as we get closer to the end of the actual season, it's going to be more important. But before we do that, we want to remind you all to make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Leave a kind rating and review. It really does help us get up the podcast charts. It allows us to be discovered by more people. So you can, if you like this podcast, if you love prospects, you love all that stuff, make sure you are subscribed to it. You can also catch us on YouTube and across FloHockey and Elite Prospects social media platforms for clips. So make sure you are signed up for all of that stuff because we've got that coming to you. And we also want to say a quick thank you to Wonderful Pistachios, our presenting sponsor. Wonderful Pistachios is a good source of protein with zero guilt. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. And Cam, we're going to get you some of those delicious,
I'm hungry.
Wonderful Pistachios coming your way very, very soon. And as you can see, I have a whole rack of them behind me here. That's definitely some good product placement on my part. But let's get to the big topic. And I teased it, but I didn't say what it was. And that is the decision. And we're talking, of course, about Gavin McKenna, the number 1 prospect for the 2026 NHL draft, one of the most exciting Canadian prospects in recent memory. Of course, you think about Connor Bedard, you think about Macklin Celebrini, you think about Connor McDavid. You're talking about all of these types of players. Gavin McKenna is building the hype train. And the decision is, will he return to the WHL next season, or will he take advantage of this new path that is available to CHL players by going to the NCAA? You wrote about this on Elite Prospects today. Let's just give a brief summary of how good this guy is. I mean, like you've been tracking him all season. I mean, we've been tracking him for years, really, and we've seen him live plenty of times. Saw him at the World Juniors, all of these incredible things. We know Gavin McKenna is special, but what really does make him special in your eyes?
He is incredibly intelligent on the ice, and that's one of my favorite skills that a player can have. You add the speed that he has, his vision is off the charts. And so, we watched Connor Bedard destroy the Western Hockey League for the Pats there a couple years ago, right? And he destroyed them with goal scoring primarily. Like, yes, he racked up a ton of assists too, but he was a bit of a one-man army on that team, and he scored at an incredible rate. Now, McKenna is not that type of player. He has 37, 38 goals this season in 54 games, so he can still put the puck into the back of the net, but he also has 80 plus assists. So his playmaking game is just supreme. I love the way he handles himself, finding open ice and then maximizing it. He's a quality person. You can tell he has that inner drive that all the best players in the world have, is that he's constantly looking to improve and get better and challenge himself. Internationally, we saw him just absolutely pluck the competition at the U18s last year. Wasn't as demonstrably good at the Helinka, but, expectations were so, ridiculously high for him. And then to play as a double underager at the U20 event. And so he's basically checked all these boxes at the junior level. He's been playing in the West since he was 15. He's put up over 200 points in 125 WHL games in his 15, 16, 17-year-old seasons. Right now he's Like on a per game basis, so we'll frame this really quickly. On a per game basis, as a draft -1 in the CHL since the turn of the century. Okay, it's Sidney Crosby, 2.29 points per game. Gavin McKenna, 2.24 points per game. Okay? Nobody else is even close. John Tavares is the next one. He's a distant third. And then after that, it's McDavid at like 1.77. Like nobody touches these two guys, Sid and McKenna. I'm not saying he's going to be Sidney Crosby, but that is in a historical framework, just on production alone, is pretty good company to be keeping. And so he's a special player who has accomplished a great deal at this level so far. And thus opens up the discussion of, is there much left for him to do in the WHL, or does he take this new challenge and move on to the NCAA?
Yeah, and that is the big question that I think everybody is trying to figure out, and we won't know for a little while. Obviously, Medicine Hat is still very much in the fold here, and there is a season to be played, and there is a decision to be made, but it probably won't be made until later in the spring. Certainly, I think any NCAA team that has the opportunity to add a Gavin McKenna will hold a spot open for him. So it's not really a time is of the essence kind of situation, even though teams might want to get ready. But, you mentioned some of those numbers: 121 points so far this season in 54 games, 2.24 points per game, just for under 18 players, let alone draft -1 players, under 18 players, and that includes Connor Bedard. He's third all time in the WHL with those 2.24 points per game as an under 18 player. Rob Brown is number 1, and Connor Bedard is number 2. Gavin McKenna is number 3. He's ahead of some of the greats, Reggie Leach, if you want to go way, way back, Mike Modano being another one, Joe Sakic. I mean, way far ahead of those guys in those, and think about those guys playing in the 1980s, and yet we're talking about Gavin McKenna being at this incredibly high level. So, and that really is where the question comes in. He still has to play another year. He can't go into the NHL next season. He's not age eligible. I think he would probably go number 1 if he was draft eligible this season, but he's not. And therefore, you have this situation where you're kind of in a limbo year, if you will. I mean, basically, you say, okay, this was not a pat. If the NCAA rule doesn't change, this isn't even a discussion worth having at this point, because it's not possible. The other thing too with McKenna in terms of where his birth date lies and everything else, having a December birth date. Let's say he wanted to go the Austin Matthews route and go to Europe. Well, he wouldn't be able to play in Europe for months. So that doesn't make sense. So there are all these different things. Also, there's a whole transfer card thing that doesn't make sense either. But this option with college now, Cam, it feels like, and when you say, okay, well, look at what Macklin Celebrini did, Adam Fantilli, all these players, it looks like this pretty interesting hybrid of, it's a little bit more challenging than junior. It's not as demanding as pro. There's more time for the weight training, all this other stuff, but also you're playing against guys that are upwards of 24, 25 years old in college hockey, whereas you'll be playing against a maximum of, 20-year-olds in the CHL. What are some of the other decision points here from a developmental standpoint for Gavin McKenna?
I think, so you nailed a bunch of them, right? Is the facilities for training, the weekend games, so you have more time in the weight room. And for a player like Gavin, who could stand to use more strength, most 17-year-olds could, but he is one of those kids that could use some more time in the weight room. During a long season where you're playing 70, 75 games or an NHL-style season, it's really difficult. It's almost impossible to put on weight. It's really difficult to even maintain your weight because you're burning so many calories every single time you're on the ice and playing so many games. And so that college schedule does open up that. I think also it's a new challenge, a new environment away from, what you become accustomed to in Medicine Hat. Is that, like, say it's Michigan, and now all of a sudden you're on a massive college campus. You're taking classes. You have responsibilities outside of just hockey. You are, you're with a whole new group of guys, new coaches, new everything, right? It's a new environment that will, I don't know about you, but you throw me into a new environment that I'm not comfortable in, and I'm razor sharp. I'm looking to be my best, to have that, good first example that I'm setting for everybody else, the first impression, and then to maintain that, right? Whereas everybody knows he's the man in Medicine Hat. And so I think it just mentally, that refocus and that new opportunity, that new challenge could come into play developmentally. And then we can talk about outside of developmentally, what are some of the more incentives that the NCAA can provide, and that is monetary too, right? Now, I will say that the Western Hockey League it does have the more pro style schedule. It is, he would be playing with these players that he's been with for a few years, and now he would have an opportunity to finish his junior time with them and stay in that organization and, move on to the NHL as a Medicine Hat Tiger. We know that, Connor Bedard really valued staying in Regina in his draft year. Rather, he had the opportunity to move on potentially to the Kamloops Blazers and have an opportunity to play in the Memorial Cup, and he chose to be a Pat. Didn't want to be traded. And so, we'll see how much that impacts Gavin's decision as well. But so there are pros and cons to both sides, I would say. And so it'll be really interesting to see how it all kind of shakes out and what really is his laundry list of things that he wants to check next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, looking at it from the college perspective, and, you did mention a little bit about the monetary benefits. Now, the NIL era is here. It is a little different for Canadian players. There are some additional hoops that have to be jumped through. There's other things that can be, but based on everything I've heard, there are going to be ways to get that sorted. It is going to come down to a number of different options. One option that I've been hearing from people around college hockey is the option of an O1 visa, which is a visa that is different from a student visa, which is the one that most athletes are. And the O1 visa, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you how feasible acquiring one of these is. But one of those is there for individuals who possess extraordinary ability in the sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics, or has demonstrated a record of extraordinary achievement in the motion picture, television industry, all those. So if you are a person of certain talent, and the country would benefit from your presence in it, those can be granted. And with that, you're allowed to earn money in this country. Whether that jives with NCAA eligibility and whatever else, I can't tell you. But I do know that that's something that I've heard that a number of people are looking into for their players. And so that's one element to get a player paid. A player like Gavin McKenna, and you might have harder numbers. I know there's a lot of speculation out there, but it is certainly not beyond the realm of possibility that a player of his caliber would fetch six figures easily. How high those six figures go is kind of unclear in terms of where it's at. But there's no question we're talking about the best recruit in the history of college hockey here. I go way back. Phil Kessel was a circus when he was committing because everybody thought he was the American Crosby. And he ends up, committing to Minnesota, which was big news. This is that times 100 as far and I love Phil Kessel, but this is that times 100. So there are other things, and we've talked about so those are the incentives on the college side. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and something that you wrote about too, Medicine Hat was in the mix for the Memorial Cup for next year. It is a WHL. They're hosting it. And the Memorial Cup has often been dangled as a way to keep players, to add players that, to come up there, to recruit, whatever you have to do, because you're guaranteed to play for a Memorial Cup. Medicine Hat did not get awarded the Memorial Cup. How much of an impact did that have, and where, what are, thinking back on that, was that a missed opportunity, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting part of this story, I would say, because, Gavin was disappointed. I think you could ask to a man, everyone on that Medicine Hat Tigers squad was disappointed that they didn't win the bid. Medicine Hat fans as well, too. And to have, a carrot like that, to know you're going to play in the Memorial Cup in your draft year, that alone might have been an incentive enough for him to stay. I'm not saying it would. I wouldn't dare to speak for him, but I just wonder if that would be a large enough carrot to get him to stay. Now, I have spoken and found out a little bit more about the process and how it's done. And it's not just the CHL looking at these bids and the commissioner or the presidents of each leagues or whatever, just being like, let's take that one. And so it comes down. I've got my notes here. Comes down to 4 criteria points. So business opportunities, so that's sponsorship, partnerships, ticket sales, the atmosphere and community engagement. Okay, event logistics. So hotels, restaurants, can they house all the people that are going to be coming to town? Will it be really accessible for the players? And they're staying at this hotel and they need to get to this rink. Do they have the public transportation or the buses or whatever? All that stuff goes into it. And then it's hockey ops, and that is obviously team construction, where they are in their life cycle, their ownership, all that kind of stuff that goes into it, and where they land. And, basically like it at the time of the decision back in the fall, the Rockets in Kelowna they received the highest scores by this committee of individuals outside of the CHL. And obviously CHL representatives are there to answer questions and to field them and to guide them in any way that they need to with information. But it's, a group of people that, I was told maybe like Colin Campbell was a part of it in years past. So like people obviously in the hockey landscape and at the professional level are coming back to help out in these decisions. And so, it's easy for us to just point and be like, what a missed opportunity, right? Like Saginaw had it last year. Michael Misa, an exceptional status player. Yeah, it was his draft -1, but it was an opportunity to give a player, a marquee player, an opportunity to be showcased on a big stage. It didn't happen with Connor McDavid. Erie never got to host one. Connor Bedard had the opportunity to be moved and get to one. And I'm sure the league would have been all about that. I'm sure the West and the CHL would have loved that to happen. So we don't get to see it all the time, these top players. Obviously, we saw Sid get there. We saw Nate McKinnon get there. Like in the past, there have been these like superstars that have had the opportunity to get there, but oftentimes they get there through the hard way, right? And that is what Gavin and the rest of the Tigers mandate and mindset is right now, is that, okay, well, we didn't get it in 2026. Well, nuts to that. We're going to win our way there this year, and they're going to end up in Rimouski. And so that's what they're focused on right now. But, it's just really, it appears to be a missed opportunity to dangle that carrot if they had the ability to do so. But from this information, it's like, it just, when you're looking at the two cities, like I've been to both cities, it's like if you ask me where I would prefer the Memorial Cup, and no disrespect to Medicine Hat, it's Kelowna is probably on those criteria points a better location. And it didn't really, according to the CHL, is that they did have that bid won and then they lost it due to COVID. That had nothing to do with it. It was supposed to be looked at as, hey, these are 4 clubs that are the finalists for it. We're going to look at them all independently and make a decision from there. So, the rest we can kind of just take it as truthful and gospel, and that it's just Medicine Hat didn't win it, and it's too bad.
Right. And I think you almost respect that, right? Because it's like, hey, we aren't going to force it, right? Just because of Gavin. And I think that's, in the end, we'll see how much of an impact that has on what ultimately happens. They will have 2 exhibition games in Yukon. They'll, that's that he's from Whitehorse. Obviously, probably going to be one of the biggest stars to come out of UConn. Obviously Dylan Cousins being another, but Gavin McKenna on a different level here. And, so that's another thing there's opportunity there. So there are these incentives, but when it comes back to this, I think for Gavin McKenna and for his future, whatever the decision is going to be, it's going to be based in hockey. I don't think it's going to be the NIL money. It was so great that he's going to college because he can make more money. I don't think that really makes sense. He's going to be making millions over the course of his career. Obviously anytime making money at 18 years old sounds great, so, hey, let's do that. But at the same time, it really has to come down to a developmental decision. As far as we know, all the big programs in college hockey have expressed interest. They'll say, "Hey, here it is." But I think there's really at this point, it's tough to know. We don't know which way he's leaning. I think in your story, his agent had said, they've kind of insulated him a little bit from these as well. These conversations, because he's still in the middle of a season. He's got to get that figured out. So with that in mind, Cam, you know, when we talk from a pure development standpoint, what more, is it just the games, the schedule, the loyalty? Like what's the developmental case to stay at Medicine Hat as far as you can tell? And I'll share my thoughts on that as well, but want to get your opinion.
Purely on ice, like it's difficult to list too many things just because he has done it for, the better part of 3 years already. Yes, as a 15-year-old, he only got to play a half season there, but it's just, he has accomplished so much. He's dominated to such an extreme level. He's played the 60 plus game season. He's had that pro, type schedule. He's had that opportunity. Obviously he would love to push deep into a playoff run this year and get to the Memorial Cup. And so if that doesn't happen, right, is that incentive regained? Is it back again next year and be like, no, we've got unfinished business with this team? Do we get Caden Lindstrom back next year? Do we get Ryder Ritchie back? Do we get Andrew Basha back? Do we get McKenna back? And do we run this thing out again a year older, a year wiser, a year stronger? And now we go and win ourselves a ship. Like that to me is probably would be the biggest draw as a player over, the strength of schedule or playing against, this age group or whatever. It would be to accomplish a goal with my buddies that I've been playing with for a few years, and then knowing full well that that's it, right? After next season, it doesn't matter if he's in the NCAA or in the Western Hockey League, that's his last season in that league because he's going to be moving to the NHL. And so that for me personally, and just speaking for myself, that would be the biggest draw for on ice to stay in the West.
Yeah, I think that could be an allure as well. And I mean, I think that my case is that it doesn't matter where he goes. Like that's like, to me, it does. But wherever he plays, it's not going to significantly change his trajectory. I do think he can stand to get stronger, as all kids at that age can. He can stand to get stronger. He can, he can potentially have those, those facilities and the different things that there is a difference. There's a difference that with what the NCAA is able to offer in terms of the physical training, the nutrition, all of those things. It's just there's a significant investment there that it does exist in the WHL. It's just a different level because you're also using the same facilities as the multi-billion-dollar football team, and everything else where you have, if you go to one of those schools. So there's always that thing. So that to me, I think for the WHL, it is just that. It's just, hey, we want to go on a long run. We want to play in a playoff series. We want to play in the hardest times of the year. We want to earn our way into the Memorial Cup, and go the hard way. So I think that certainly has value. And I don't think there's not a ton of like, you'll be at a place too long. And I think at a player like Gavin McKenna, because he thinks the game at such a high pace, it doesn't really matter. But I do think if you want him to make a more significant impact in year one in the NHL, I do think the better path for him is the NCAA. And I think you look at Connor Bedard and the dominance that he displayed in his draft season, and he was still very good as a rookie. But now you look at what Macklin Celebrini is doing, and you say he was a bit more prepared. Now they're different players and they play different games, but we're talking about Celebrini closing in on being a top tier center, quickly, and Bedard still finding his way. Was 1 year at BU the difference? I can't tell you that definitively, but I can tell you that he was challenged there. He was still the best player in college hockey, and now he's, arguably one of the most exciting talents in the NHL, up and coming. So there's a lot there. I think, to me, there's a lot of factors at play. He can't make a bad decision, I don't think. As long as the decision is made with his best intentions in mind, with his development cared after, all those things. I don't think he can make a bad decision here, whether he stays or whether he goes. I think as a college hockey fan, having a player of that caliber is would be a lot of fun. But at the same time, he's got to make the best decision for him. The one thing I will say, Cam, about this, and I'd love to get your take. This is probably, in this new era of NCAA and CHL and the new rules, this is a flashpoint moment. If a player like Gavin McKenna goes and succeeds, that is why I think there is such focus on this and nerves from the CHL and WHL side, that kind of waiting with bated breath from the NCAA side. In the same way that Jack Eichel stemmed the flow of elite American players going to the CHL, this could be that basically in reverse, where it takes kids from the CHL from Canada. Do you get that sense too, or is there more to it than, or am I over analyzing and every player has to make their own decision?
I don't think it can be overstated how much this decision could impact junior hockey. Like
Yeah.
like I don't want to put that on Gavin, but it is such a bellwether moment. It is, I talk about it in the article where it's like, 25 OHLers have already committed to go to the NCAA next season, but they're all aging out of junior hockey, right? And the OHL celebrating the decision to do it. And it's a great opportunity for those players that normally would age out and then would be like, am I going to U Sports in Canada? Am I going to go try to play in the ECHL or something like that? Now you have potentially 4 more years to develop in a good program, get a degree, then maybe look at joining some pro hockey, right? Like it's an awesome opportunity for 20-year-olds. And for the CHL, they'll celebrate those. Losing like a high level draft +1, like a Michael Misa, if he decides he's not going to compete for an AHL job next year, or a Porter Martone or something like that, that is going to be a tough pill to swallow for the CHL, but it's still, they developed them until their draft year and they still sent them away as, a top 5 pick or whatever. And that's still a feather in their cap. But the death knell is to lose a player like McKenna. And that's not me speaking for the CHL. That's just obvious. And it's that this is their most marketable piece in the country. You do not want to lose him as a draft eligible, because the CHL is and has been forever the number 1 feeder league to the NHL, right? All the majority of the first round picks come from the CHL. The majority of draft picks overall comes from the CHL. And yes, the program in the States and some top tier Euro leagues have started to chip away at that in the last decade or so, but it's still the CHL and then everybody else. And so if all of a sudden a player like McKenna goes, not only succeeds, but thrives, and like potentially, we're going to talk about Hobey Baker candidates here in a minute. It's like, I don't think it's too much to think that he could go and become an instant Hobey Baker, threat as a first year player.
Easily.
We've seen it. We've seen these, right? Exactly, right? So to go there and thrive and then step into the NHL and thrive maybe and have a more seamless transition. Not to say he wouldn't have a seamless transition coming out of the Western Hockey League, but if it comes that route, who's to say Landon DuPont isn't next, right? The exceptional status defenseman forever right now. Who's to say that he doesn't look at his draft eligible season and be like, maybe I should accelerate my high school like Gavin did, so that I have that opportunity to go to college in my draft year too. Who's to say that it's not, Maddox Schultz next down the line, right? It's that right. They don't want to be losing the very best. They're exceptional players early. And that's why this is such a watershed moment and decision. It sucks that it's got to be on Gavin to do, but I do feel strongly that he is just going to simply make the decision that's best for him for a full year of development, and not, to play 2 games in his hometown in Whitehorse, which I'm sure he would absolutely love to do and to give to that community, but he's not going to make a decision based on 2 preseason games, and I insinuate that he potentially could have made that decision because knowing that he played in the Memorial Cup, but that's me putting out my position on how I feel like might be that carrot might have been enough. That might not have been enough for him either. That might have been like, he'd been like, yes, it would be great to play in a Memorial Cup, but I'm not going to let my entire season be hinged on that. So it's just such a mass. I don't think it can be overstated how much this could impact junior hockey in Canada.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that is it is a watershed flashpoint. Whatever you want to use to call it, it is
Buzzword.
that,
Yeah.
and that's why I
Yeah.
think that anytime we talk about this, anytime it's written about, anytime anything, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it because it is a significant thing. Now we've heard as well the NHL has kind of wanted to step in to. Uh, you know, provide guidance, but it sounds more like, really they're just kind of asking, what do we got? What do we need to do? Like, what do you guys want? There's really not a lot the NHL can do in terms of NCAA governance. There's certainly a lot more say they have with the CHL. But until there's a collective bargaining agreement change too, like that's the other thing that we just don't know in terms of, because the rules that govern the CHL players drafted out of the CHL and the rules that govern the players drafted out of the NCAA are different. And so that's going to
Hmm.
require some work as well. So many moving parts to this, but Gavin McKenna and his decision is the biggest part of all of it, and will really set the stage for where things go. Because I think we've talked a lot about different players. I think you look at guys like Misa Martone, whoever there might be, and just because of the way their season has gone, like Michael Misa might be saying, "Hey, I might as well just sign that NHL contract, give myself a chance to play this season." Whereas
Yeah.
earlier in the year was like, hey, maybe that college was that little, gap year
Hmm.
kind of that you're going to take to get to the NHL. So there's so many different things that'll happen here. What I can say is that the great thing about this, and one path is not necessarily better than the other. The fact is that development in both countries has never been, better in terms. I mean, maybe it's been better in terms of the sheer volume of players, but really we're at a stage right now where players have options available to them and they are now empowered to make those choices a little bit later than they had to before, which I think is a good thing, a net positive. But we will have so much more on Gavin McKenna. Before we get out of here, is there anything else that we did not cover on young Gavin that needs to be said? I feel like we got a good chunk of it there.
We did. It's highly complex. It's highly layered. You mentioned the CBA and like there's so many moving parts at this point that are just outside of the hockey landscape and the individual players. And so it will be and continue to be a fascinating storyline with serious implications, and which is why I'll keep digging and writing about it, and we'll keep talking about it here on the show.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest stories in our industry, really, and one of the most important players. And considering the 2025 NHL draft has not been super fun to cover, we're all looking forward to 2026 in particular, and we'll see where we are spending the bulk of that season. All right. We're going to stay with college hockey because it is college hockey time of year. The Frozen Four is in early April 9th and 11th. So we will have on-site coverage for you from FloHockey. Also, we'll be having a lot of lead-up coverage. As we record this, it's conference championship weekend in college hockey. The tournament field will be set by Saturday. So many of you will be listening to this podcast after that has already happened. The good news is that there are already about 11 teams that we know for sure will be in the NCAA tournament based on their current pairwise rating, which is what is essentially the subjective or the objective, the objective measure and math algorithm that essentially allows, or formula that allows you to make the selections. As of right now, Boston College, number one team. Cam, I just wanted to quickly, and I'll this is where I get a chance to just go wax a little bit on college hockey. The top teams have been evident for a while: Boston College, Michigan State. Then you've got some of Minnesota's kind of been hovering around that. Western Michigan has been one of the surprise teams of the year. Outstanding goaltending tandem. Alex Bump, who wasn't a Hobey candidate, who we're going to talk about in a bit, but they've got a number of players that have made a huge difference. Maine has been a factor. We thought Brad Nadeau leaving, that's it. The Maine's
Mhm.
it was great. It was fun while it lasted. Ben Barr has done a fantastic job for the Maine Black Bears, has turned them into a contender. As we record this, Michigan and Penn State, great seasons for both of them, but they're on the tournament bubble. They need to make sure that there are no, for Michigan, no upsets in the conference
Yeah.
championships for the auto bids. Otherwise, they're out. Penn State is if there are two upsets for auto bids, then that could be trouble for them. Arizona State had a historic year in NCHC and yet need to win the NCHC tournament to get into the tournament. But I want to pause and talk about a team that I know you've seen and I've seen and really I think anybody's seen, and it's a team that if they're gonna, they fell agonizingly short last year, but it's Boston College, and I want to talk specifically about the number of players there. They are the number one seed according to the College Hockey News' pairwise probability matrix. They have a 100% probability of being the number one overall seed, which means they will likely play the Atlantic Hockey Champion, you can watch that championship game on FloHockey. It'll either be Bentley or Holy Cross as the 16 seed. But let's talk Boston College here, Cam. There are so many things to like about the team. Ryan Leonard, we've talked about a lot. I don't think we've talked enough about Jacob Fowler. We're going to talk about Hobey top 10. Jacob Fowler was not in it, and I think that is incorrect. Jacob Fowler, a 940 save percentage, Montreal Canadiens draft pick. He has 24 wins this season, 7 shutouts for Jacob Fowler. He has been an absolute machine this year. He has, I believe, only two games rather, where he allowed more than 3 goals in a game. Typically, he's only allowing 1 or 2. And then, as we mentioned, he has those 7 shutouts. Jacob Fowler was an interesting player to track in his draft year. He's only gotten more fascinating as time has gone on. I mean, this is one of the best goaltenders and goaltending prospects in the game today, I feel.
Oh, without a doubt. He is so money, right? Like ice water in the veins. Like you said, the 940 save percentage. He is, I'm upset that he wasn't a Hobey finalist. Like Devin Levi a couple years ago put up the 952, right? And stole the show everywhere. Ryan Miller, put up a 950 in his year and stole the show. And it's like, he's right there with those guys. Like we're a couple percentage points below here, but like on a historic level, he's among the top 10 goal. This is among the top 10 goaltender seasons ever in the NCAA. Like
Right.
it's just how it is. And he is kind of, I don't want to say the beating heart because that is Ryan Leonard, but you take one of them out of the lineup, I think that you lose Fowler, it impacts that team more than losing Ryan Leonard, just because they are so deep up front, and that Fowler is just so reliable back there and so calm and just makes huge saves, and he makes the timely saves, and he's a serious player at this level. And like you said, as a draft eligible, it looked like he was going to be a good player, but maybe I didn't have this high of expectations. And yeah, granted, he plays on a very, very strong team, and that's obviously going to help boost your metrics. But no, the Habs have a good one coming here.
They do. And you know what? He was an interesting guy to follow in his draft year. Played for the Youngstown Phantoms in the USHL. And do you recall the knock on Jacob Fowler in his draft season?
Was it the glove hand? What was it? Was it the glove?
No, it had nothing to do with his goaltending. It was, they didn't like the amount of weight that he had on him. And teams were concerned that he didn't have the drive,
the work ethic. Yes.
The work ethic, and that, and this has been like, I remember years ago, Frankie Vetrano, it was the same thing. Teams did not draft him because of his physique and but I was like, the guy shoots the puck really well. And he eventually, there were a number of reasons that he couldn't seem to lose weight. Fowler has definitely transformed himself over these last couple of years. The thing that has always stood out about Jacob, and the reason that I think he's such an exceptional goalie, is he is an incredibly smart goalie. He has elite hockey sense. He does not make many of those flashy saves because he's often in the right spot. He has improved his conditioning. He's improved. And really that never held him back. He won a Clark Cup. But there were those concerns, and I think those were valid concerns, and that's why he was a 3rd round pick in that draft year. So you go back to the goalies in that draft year, Trey Augustine obviously was one of those guys, and he's very much one of the best goalies in college hockey as well. But you go back to the goalies of that draft year, and there were 5 taken in the second round. Adam Guyon was the number 1 goalie taken. Michael Harabel, who's been very good for UMass. Trey Augustine, who's been outstanding for Michigan State. Carson Bjarnason, Damian Clara, and then Jacob Fowler, 69th overall to Montreal. And we're talking about one of the best goalies in college hockey. He is a finalist for the Richter Award. But to me, as I look at Boston College and I say, if this team is going to win, they're doing it on the back of Jacob Fowler. They're doing it on the kicked out leg pads of Jacob Fowler.
Yeah.
But then the good news for them is that they do have Ryan Leonard. They have James Hagens. They have Gabe Perreault. They have they have a really good D core. But Boston College did just lose to Northeastern in the Hockey East quarterfinals. They will not play for a Hockey East championship. And so even without that, they're still the number 1 team. They did not win the Bean Pot. So now they've got to say, okay, can you win the big game? That's going to be the next question for BC. But those are some, and I'd say Michigan State, because of Augustine, because of Isaac Howard, those are guys that's a team that absolutely has a chance to make some real noise in this tournament. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for that. But I do want to talk about the Hobey top 10 because we've talked about it a little bit. Okay, go ahead. You got something. I want to hear what you have to say.
Just real quick. Since you refreshed the Jacob Fowler thing and the conditioning and the overweight thing, and I had to dig back into my mind, is that he was still the best goalie in the USHL playing for Youngstown that year, right? Like he out-dueled Augustine, right? On a consistent basis, he played like thrice as many games. He had similar save percentage numbers. And then he did it while being out of shape. And so it's like, if I'm a team looking at that, I'm like, oh boy, if we can light a fire under this kid, right? Rather than, but instead it was like, let's stay away from him because maybe he doesn't have the fire. It's like, you see him, it's the same with like, Phil used to get that ragged on him too, right? It's like, guy didn't have to work out because he was just naturally gifted. But if you could get him in the weight room for a half minute, he's going to pop 40 for you on the regular, and lo and behold. So it's like, it's always, it's kind of just an interesting reframing of mindset depending on an organization. Is that like, do they look at it as a negative, or is it a market inefficiency that we can take advantage of?
Yeah, and one thing I will say about the Habs, I remember after that draft, they released some of their draft room conversations about Jacob Fowler. It wasn't about weight. It wasn't about physique. It was, hey, this guy wins. And that year, in 9 USHL playoff games, he won 8 of them, had a .952 save percentage in the playoffs. So that was, and to me, that was always the thing. And, the head-to-head, Trey Augustine he was the starting goalie for the World Junior team last year. So there's that. We're going to talk about these two guys a little bit again later because I think they are forever linked because of their draft year and because of the path they chose and some of these other touch points. We're going to talk about them later, but that Jacob Fowler, really exciting. And I think if you're a Habs fan, you're saying, Ivan Demidov, Jacob Fowler, you're seeing what Lane Hutson's doing. There's a lot of fun things happening for Habs fans in terms of what their future looks like. But I did want to talk a little bit about the Hobey top 10. The Hobey top 10 came out yesterday. Jacob Fowler, as we know, did not make it. There was only one player from Hockey East, despite the fact they're probably going to have 6 teams in the NCAA tournament this year, most of any conference. But they do have a top 10 that will include 2 players from Denver, Zeev Buium and Jack Devine. Jack Devine is a second year. And if Zeev Buium had that incredible season last year, was not a top 10 finalist last year, which still doesn't make sense to me. Aiden Fink from Penn State, Matt Godowski, the defenseman from Army, Isaac Howard from Michigan State, Ryan Leonard from Boston College, Ayrton Martino from Clarkson, Liam McClinsky from Holy Cross, Jimmy Snuggerud from Minnesota, and Alex Tracy from Minnesota State, who actually has a higher save percentage than Jacob Fowler this year. 1 point, just before we get into the discussion, when the top 10 is named, the Hobey committee does not select the top 10. That's actually selected via a combination of the fan vote, which accounts for like less than 1% of the vote, and college coaches. They also try to make sure that every conference is represented in the top 10. So that already freezes guys out. There were 2 from the Atlantic Hockey this year, which is the first time that's ever happened. And so there is also it's really tight at the top. But the, I'll say this: there are some snubs here as well. We talked about Fowler. Cole O'Hara from UMass might have one of the best arguments of any player that's not on this list to be on this list. Quinn Hudson, who is one of the top players, and yes, that is another Hudson, not defenseman Hudson. Quinn Hudson, one of the points per game leaders, and then Albin Boya is another one that I pointed out from Maine. But if as you look at the NCAA scoring this year, Cam, it's really tough to see the separation. We saw Celebrini was able to separate, Fantilli was able to separate. There's no separation this year. Any of those names stand out to you as guys that you particularly like for their potential for this award?
Oh God, it like you that was what I was gonna say. Is that like who's the front runner here, right? Like,
Right.
is there a definitive front runner? Like, I I love Zeev, but I don't think you can be like, there's your guy. I love Leonard. He's
Right.
been a dominant player at this level. Like, he might win it on some of the stuff he's done in the past too. That might go into play here. Snugs has been just money in the bank for Minnesota the whole time he's been there too. Yeah, Isaac Howard had just a monster start and middle, but he's kind of cooled a little bit. And I like Isaac Howard just because he struggled early in his NCAA career too. So like, and part of it is like off ice too, right? Like, this isn't just on ice play. Like, that's why we see
Right.
seniors win it so often and historically too, right? It's like the community based stuff and like all that things too. So I honestly, I wouldn't be laying any coin on this one this year. This one seems like a pretty open race.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either. And I think that's you look, you kind of you try to find the ways, to build the top 10. Both of the top scoring defensemen are Buyum and Godowski. They're both finalists. The top scoring player is Divine, 54 points at this point, 41 assists, most in the nation. The leading goal scorer is Ryan Leonard with 29. 30 has kind of been a magical number to hit in a single season in men's college hockey because you typically are playing a max of around 42 games. So that's, guys that hit 30 goals, that's a pretty good indicator. You've only got 3 players, and Cole O'Hara, who is not one of the top 10 finalists, is a 4th player with 50 plus points so far this season. When you look at the points per game, Aiden Fink is tops in that with 1.41. So, you're kind of hitting all those players. And as I mentioned, Quinn Hudson is number 2 with 1.39 points per game. So there's a lot of really interesting things. And, the Hobey committee is made up of a lot of different people from various stakeholders in college hockey. And as you mentioned, it's often gone to guys that are seniors or, and this year there's just so many sophomores. Liam McClinsky is one of the seniors in the mix this year. Alex Tracy is a junior. Jimmy Snuggerud is a junior. So there's some upperclassmen, but really I cannot recall I know they've existed, but like it feels like it's been fairly obvious. Even though some years there are surprises like Jimmy VC winning or Dryden McKay winning. Those have been kind of some of the surprises. This year, I really couldn't tell you where it's going to go. I think these next couple of weeks will help determine that. The Hobey goes to the winner on on the Friday between the semifinals and the championship game at the Frozen Four. So we will know in a few weeks who is the winner of this award. But boy, I got to tell you, it's pretty crazy to look at this group. And then lastly, there's only one goaltender on there. It's Alex Tracy. He was the CCHA Player of the Year. No Fowler, no Trey Augustine, no Albin Boya. Those 4 guys are in the mix for the Mike Richter Award, and it's become ever harder for a goalie to win the Hobey. And the fact that Devin Levi didn't win it with a 950 plus save percentage is still one of those things where you're just like, okay, well, I don't really know if we'll see another goalie win, and then Dryden McKay won, and then you're like, okay, well, we'll figure it out. But lots of craziness there. Cam, any other closing thoughts on the Hobey list? Any things that you're going to be looking for in these next couple of days and weeks from these players? I mean, it feels like at least a few of these guys have a little bit of something in there. if they can do something here, they might be able to separate themselves just a little bit. Anything in particular you're going to be looking for?
Oh, well, obviously, right? Big goals and big games coming up big is going to go a long way too, right? And recency bias comes into play too, right? So it all you play for these big moments. And so I love conference championship weekend. I love the big tournament too. So there is definitely going to be opportunities for these players to have that one last exclamation point. And I hope we see several of them do that, because that's going to make for some dramatic hockey. And obviously, a player that's not on this list who I'm very interested in watching over the next little bit will be James Hagens.
Yes, James Hagens, not on the list, and not, when you think about Adam Fantilli, Hobey Baker winner, number 2 overall pick, Jack Eichel, Hobey Baker winner, number 2 overall pick, Macklin Celebrini, Hobey Baker winner, number 1 overall pick. Where is James Hagens going to end up? He did not have that kind of season. And I will say, and he'll be part of our Beyond Belief segment, so we can talk a little bit more about Jimmy Hagens in just a second. So a lot of great things coming up. As I mentioned, Atlantic Hockey, you can watch their championship game on Saturday on FloHockey, Holy Cross versus Bentley. That is a game. Whoever wins that game goes to the NCAA tournament. We will also have on-site coverage of the Frozen Four. I will be there, as will Liz Child. We'll have plenty of coverage for you as we continue to dive into college hockey. Lots of coverage on FloHockey.tv as well. So make sure you are checking out all of those. Also, one quick note: we did have our first college free agent signing. John Prokop from Union signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Many of the top college free agents are still playing and will be playing for a few more weeks, so they won't be able to make that decision. But Prokop signs, a very interesting 6'3" left shot, good skater. This is a weak crop of college free agents, as we mentioned last week, but he is one that is now attached to an NHL team, and the Toronto Maple Leafs were the team that got us cooking on that one. So stay tuned for more signings. We'll have a full tracker on FloHockey.tv as well. All right, let's get to our Beyond Belief segment, Cam, because we've got some college stuff, but I also threw in some draft stuff as well. That's some of it college adjacent, some of it not. So we can talk a little bit. But let's go back to our initial big topic. And that topic is, and again, if you're new to the show, this is where we give a statement, and then one of us will decide whether it's beyond belief or believable. Gavin McKenna will be on a college campus at the start of 2025-26.
Well, I mean, it's 100% believable, but if you're asking me to like set the betting odds on it, and it's interesting. Like, I got a text just 5 minutes ago while we were on the show, and someone being like, are you like legitimately like confident that he's going to leave the WHL? And I'm like, I'm not confident in anything because he hasn't made a decision yet. But I said I wouldn't make a bet on the Hobey Baker. If you had to have me put some of my hard-earned cash that I make from this podcast, these millions of dollars we're bringing in, you and I, Chris, I would say you're not getting your millions, man. I would say that I would probably lean towards him being on a college campus for 2025-26, but that is far from assured. But it's absolutely believable, and yes, I think it is a very realistic outcome. How about that?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's believable. I think it is. I would lean towards that way as well. Some of the other factors being that he's who he's being advised by. They have had a lot of players that have gone the college route and had a ton of success. So it's a path that is known, and it's not, it's less known to Gavin more than anybody, because it really wasn't necessarily even something that was on the radar when he committed to play in the WHL. So I still think that there is a strong chance that it happens, and that, we'll be seeing one of the greatest recruiting chases in the history of college hockey, if there is to be one. So that is where I'm at. I turn it back over to you, my friend.
Okay, I'm just going to throw a little wrench into this too, just because I reported it months
ago.
I
love wrenches.
If this question was Michael Misa is on a college campus in 2025-26, and you asked me that 4 months ago, I would have said the same thing. I would change my answer today. Like we mentioned earlier, I do believe that he has played so well this season that internally the mandate now has shifted from that gap year playing in college and having a new opportunity to being like, I'm playing in the NHL next year and I'm going to do what's important to get there, which is probably going to push the likelihood of him playing the NCAA way down for next season. So I just
Yeah,
thought I'd throw that out there too.
I agree. I agree completely with that. And hey, credit to the player. He played his way into people
Yeah.
believing, hey, this you might be ready to go. We were talking about who's going to be a guy that can go straight into the NHL, and we're like, I don't know if anybody can. He's starting to
Mm-hmm.
look a little bit more like he can. And
Yeah.
that's huge credit to him and the way he's played this year. All right, I'll
Yeah.
turn it back over to
Okay.
you,
I
my
got one
friend.
for you. Okay. Boston College, Boston will walk to the Natty Championship. Okay.
So there's no such thing as a walk in college hockey, but I will say that they are the favorite. As far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned, they are the team that will that I look at as the most complete in terms of the ability to build a champion. I think they're very well coached. Jacob Fowler is a significant reason that I believe in this team to go far. They have struggled in must-win games this year, but there is one guy that hasn't really struggled in must-win games this year, and that's Ryan Leonard. I think that he is an impact player. He's a guy that obviously captain USA to the gold medal. Having him, and I also think James Hagens. It's time for him to step up, and we'll talk about him again here in Beyond Belief. But it's time for him to be the guy in these must-win games. And I think they have the ability to do that. So I think top to bottom, they're one of the best built teams. They are certainly not a lock because there is no such thing in the NCAA tournament when it's single elimination. But Boston College, to me, is the clear favorite to win the national championship this year. And that's a big reason why Ryan Leonard came back. It wasn't just because, he could have gone to the NHL last year, but he was so hurt by them losing the national championship last year that he took it personally. And now he's back to finish some of that business. So we will see. But that's my thought. I think of the teams, Michigan State's absolutely a contender. I think Minnesota is absolutely a contender, though I'm less certain about their goaltending. It's going to be an absolute war to get to the NCAA championship in St. Louis this year. I cannot wait to follow it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think, like we could rattle, Denver, Yukon, like Western Michigan, like
Yes.
Maine, there are a bunch of teams that
Yeah.
that could be standing at the end of the day. Right. But I do love that point of, unfinished business and to come back for Ryan Leonard and to be with that group. And he's the leader and he's the guy, and to have, Jacob Fowler in that and just to have all those pieces that they have and to come so achingly close a year ago, that there is unfinished business. And now storybook endings don't always happen, but I do think that has to be taken into account and that gives them a slight edge. And so I'm with you where I think they are the favorite. And now it's just time to get it done, which, as you mentioned, they have struggled to get it done in those big moments at this point. And whether they were overlooking Northeastern the other day there or not, it's like there's no more room for error now, right? It's put up or shut up.
It really is. And I'm glad you mentioned Denver too, because you can't count them out. Obviously, they're the defending national champions and they
Yeah.
have many players back from that team, not the least of which is Zeke Bouillon, Jack Devine, Matt Davis. I mean, that is a team that absolutely can be a threat and certainly well coached with David Carl as well. So we will see where it all goes. They played their best hockey at the end of last season. We'll see if they have another run in them here. All right. This one is we're going to go turn our attention to the draft here because this has been in the news a little bit more. I know you and I have both been hearing things about this, but let's go with it. And I think we may have had this on a on a Beyond Belief before, but I feel like there's more information. The NHL's centralized draft, which is to say that there are your decentralized draft, where all the teams are not at the draft site. This will be a one and done. It's in LA this year. The teams will not be there. The league is saying about 50 prospects will be there, or at least 50 prospects will be invited. Many more can come if they want. They just aren't formally invited. So Cam, I ask you, NHL's decentralized draft is a one and done operation.
Oh man, this is a tough one for me. I reported about a week ago that I just had someone whisper into my ear that there was some push that maybe this would be a one and done, and maybe they'd look at, there was some factions that are really interested in it being in Montreal every year or every second year, and we heard from the GM meetings down in Florida that Gary Bettman clearly doesn't like this change. He's made that clear a couple of times behind closed doors and now in the public sector, where it's like, you guys made your bed, now you're going to lie in it. I talked to a league source. There was that rumor even floating around Vegas last year when we were asking some people that it was like, to have this overturned, it would have to be a unanimous decision by the GMs to overturn it. And we know that there are a couple of GMs in power right now that are really against the centralized draft. They don't like just all the eyes on them, how difficult it is to hear each other on the floor, to, where everyone's putting them under a microscope for who they're talking to, and how it kind of hinders the trades and the potentials and all that stuff. And they really wanted to do their work elsewhere. And so the potential of having a unanimous vote was like super unlikely. But now that, I'm told that is not the case, that a mechanism in place is it doesn't have to be unanimous. But I'm still not going to like let my heart be broken expecting this to be changed after LA. I'm not ready to do it just because the NHL has hurt me enough times, right? I'm not going to just forget about those times, right?
Right.
I'm not going to do that to myself. I'm not going to put myself out there. So I'm going to be in LA by myself, probably not a GM in sight for me to schmooze. And I'm going to be getting a sunburn, and it's going to be okay. But I'm expecting to be doing the same thing in Seattle by myself in 26 probably. But I do strongly believe that it will be back. I do believe that the centralized draft will be back. I'm just not ready to say with confidence that it will be back next year.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say it's beyond belief for one and done, but it's coming back. I think that the wheels started in motion in Vegas when everybody was like, "Oh, what are we doing? Why are we?"
Yeah.
This was awesome. Now they're not all going to be like that, but still, this was awesome. Why are we doing it this way? And so that's the thing, is like, what is best for the game? The draft has traditionally been something that NHL has done very well, which is why one of the best things they've done, which is why Gary Bettman was against this in the first place. But I love that he is just continually saying, "This is what you wanted. See,
Yeah.
everybody hates it, but you wanted it." So I love it. I love that Gary is like, nah, I'm not. You guys, this is on you. And so to those GMs that are on the fence still, I say to you, don't be stupid. This has got to come back. It is the way that, like, and God bless Steve Mayer, who's, runs events for the NHL. He has a Herculean effort that I'm sure, he'll knock out of the park, and people will be okay with it. But to do what we do, Cam, obviously we have bias, because doing what we do is a lot easier when there are a lot of people there that we can just run into and find things out. But you talk to anybody that's ever been to a draft, you talk to any player, that it is an unforgettable experience, and it is completely unique. So it may not be one and done, but if it's any more than two and done, I think it's going to be, we're going to be back sooner than later, when everybody realizes what happened. And I will hate watch the heck out of that thing. So,
are you not coming?
Yeah, that's what I got.
Are you not coming?
Well, I mean,
hang out with me in
I may
LA?
be there hate watching it.
Okay.
So,
Okay. All right. Good.
We'll
Yeah.
see. I haven't decided, because of this, for the same reason that you've talked about, is like, are we going to be by ourselves? Like, who are we going to talk to? Unfortunately, the players
We'll have
have
each
been
other, Chris.
some of the least interesting people to talk to in those couple of days there.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see. I want to get more information and figure out exactly how this is going to look before I make any decisions, but we'll see. But
Boy, oh boy,
anyway, let's
be by
wrap this
myself
thing
sometime.
up. Anyway.
All right. Okay, last one for you here. James Hagens will change the perceptions of his draft stock in these closing weeks of his college season.
Yeah, I think I believe that he can, to a certain extent. I don't think it's going to change him being a a top 3 pick again. I feel like that ship may have sailed. What I will say though is that one of the arguments against James Hagens has been lack of big game performances. Now, he had a goal in the gold medal game at the World Juniors, but last year at the under 18 Worlds, it was the only game he set the record for most points scored in the under 18 tournament, but did not have a point in the gold medal game that USA lost. This year against Boston University in some of those big games, Beanpot, things like that, he did not have a point. Again, they have their situation last week where they get bounced from Northeastern, but he did have a point. He scored a late goal and was on the ice in those key moments. Basically, if Boston College is going to win this thing, they need James Hagens, because it can't just be Ryan Leonard. It can't just be Gabe Perreault. And then, do they have enough scoring depth outside of those guys and outside of Hagens to make it work? But if Hagens is producing, they have a great chance to do something special there. I think that he has an opportunity to remind all of us of how much his skill can shine in the toughest games, because that's what these will be. If he doesn't do that, perceptions are not going to change. I believe that it's in him. I think that, he's had a good stretch here for the last couple of weeks. He's been scoring more in February, only 2 games of the 2 games of the 8 he has played where he didn't have a point. So he's making an impact. But I still think that the ship of him being, is he a top 5 pick? Is he a top 7 pick? Those are the things that we're starting to talk about now with James Hagens, because, he was a point per game player, which is great, but it's not close to the things that we've seen top draft guys do. It's better than what Brady Tkachuk did, but it's not better. It's not close to, celebrating. And maybe it's not fair to compare him to those guys. Maybe he was never going to be those guys. But he's in a situation where points probably should have come fairly easily, and they didn't this year with his skill set. So I do think perception can change, but I'm intrigued to see where they go from here.
Yeah, I think you right at the end there, you brought up a really strong point, is that, where and how the situation he's playing in should have been conducive to more, right? So a point a game season in the NCAA is in a bubble, in a vacuum. It's impressive, right? As you're draft eligible to put up 35 and 35, but he's playing with some of the best players in college hockey on one of the best teams in college hockey, seeing power play minutes, seeing, all that top 6 time. And, he had a pretty decent February, but he's got 6 points in his last 10 games down the stretch, right? I'm not sure I could take his game the last 2 months, 3 months even, and be able to look at myself in the mirror and say, this is a top 5 player in this draft. I don't think he's played at that level. And so now the clock is ticking to, is there even enough time for him to change that narrative at this point? Not to say that he's not going to go 4. I still think, that the pedigree is there, the history is there, that he could go at number 4, number 5. But he hasn't been playing up to that level of late. And so these final weeks are massive for him to show up in a big way. And it doesn't all have to be scoring, right? He's been a passenger so much in some of the games that I've been watching recently, and throughout the entire season, really, is that deferring and kind of being there as a support player. And it's no, you know what? You have a full season of NCAA under your belt. You are able to take the bull by the horns a little bit at this level. And so that's what I'll really be looking for down the stretch.
Yeah, man, it's crazy, right? I think that you look at what he did last year and what has happened this year, and you're just, it's been a bit underwhelming, and I still think he's a really good player. I think that there's a lot that he's going to bring to an NHL team, but it all comes back to those expectations that we talked about last week. Is everybody, you come into the year with number 1, anything less than that is going to look like a disappointment. And the fact of the matter is you're still going to get a great player if you draft James Hagens, one of the best players in this draft. You're just, the questions are there, and they really come up in these big games. And so to me, he's got to remind people of what he's capable of. if he's going to have that opportunity to be a top tier talent. All right. We come down to our final segment, and we teed it up a little bit with our Jacob Fowler talk earlier, but these two guys are going to be linked forever. And we've seen them in various stages of their career, similar age, similar path, everything else. So in the spirit of our final segment, which is you have to pick one, I give you Cam Robinson. You've got to ride one goalie from now until the national championship game. Do you choose Trey Augustine of Michigan State or Jacob Fowler of Boston College?
You're just setting me up to have the Hab fans come after me again, aren't you here, hey? I gotta go with Trey. I mean, he's got the golds, right? He's got World Junior golds, he's got U18 gold. I think not to say Fowler's, he's got that Clark Cup. He's got a gold too at the World Juniors, but he was the second guy. I'll go Trey. I'll just gut initial instinct reaction here. I'm going to go with Augustine, the guy who I've seen put a team on his back and win it all and win the big game. Where Fowler, last year didn't win the big game, and it just hasn't. And then was number 2 on the pecking order for the Americans at the juniors. So I'll go with Augustine just because. Ice water in the veins, kid's got it, and I'll give him that edge. How about you?
Yeah, he does. The thing is, so as I look at the way that Trey has played this season, I think he's been below his standard for a chunk of this season. And that's not to say that is going to continue, but if I look between who's playing how at the moment, and obviously losing the last game to Northeastern was not great for Jacob Fowler. But at the same time, it was 2 goals allowed. You expect your teammates to score a little bit more for you. There was an empty netter there in that loss as well. You expect to get a little bit more goal support. And, it's been a while since he's had a bad game. To me, I think the consistency that you're getting from Jacob Fowler right now is the difference. If you were to ask me this question in totality, body of work, and not taking into consideration, who's hot at the moment, it would be Augustine, because we've already seen that decision made between these two players at the World Juniors 2 years ago. They had, there was a real discussion. Should Fowler start over Augustine? They decided that Augustine gave them the best chance to win the gold medal. And guess what? They won the gold medal. They followed the same exact path this year. And what did they do? They won another gold medal. And Augustine was a huge factor in winning both of those gold medals. But I also look at Jacob Fowler over the career that he's had, and he's been really good. And to me, right now, he's playing some of the best hockey of any goalie I've seen in the country. So for that reason, at this period of time, and I love Trey Augustine, but if I'm looking right now objectively of how they're playing, I got to go with Jacob Fowler. And I do think that he's going to be the difference in allowing Boston College to take it to the next level. So will they win it all? Well, if Jacob Fowler plays to his standard, they certainly will. Michigan State obviously has a chance if Trey Augustine plays to his standard as well. We're talking about 2 of the very best young goalies in the game today, and both American. So we've had that discussion a few times this year about the goalie pipelines. And, how about America? You got a kid from Michigan and a kid from Florida. So
how about Dustin
anyway.
Wolf?
All right. So Cam, after setting the world ablaze with Gavin McKenna stories, what's coming up next for you on Elite Prospects? What can we look forward to? Whose ire can you draw next?
Whose feathers can I ruffle? Well, first of all, you got to get over there. You got to check out. We've been talking about college hockey, all this thing. I mentioned it last week, but check out. We got our NCAA free agent guide over there. The boys did a ton of work on that. I had nothing to do with it, so it's going to be good. We have our under 23 skater rankings out. That's a really cool article. You did a good job on that when you've got fans being like, they put Jake Sanderson ahead of Ivan Demidov. Like, these guys don't know hockey. Like, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for, people. Wow. So we nailed that one too. For me personally, yeah, we've got a draft meeting coming up, so I'm really trying to like pound the pavement a little bit and get some scouting reports in and getting eyeballs on these players, and then just enjoying the stretch run here ahead of Dallas too. So, but I'm sure I'll come up with some few pieces here to see if I can get the ire up on somebody's radar, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, over at FloHockey, we are also got a lot of focus on college hockey right now. We'll have, as I mentioned, the Atlantic Hockey Championship. You can you can read the preview for that. You can also watch that on Saturday. Plenty more college hockey coverage. We also have our own NCAA free agent guide that I put together. The news and notes from around college hockey, how the picture looks heading into conference tournaments, and then we'll also have all of our various Frozen Four and NCAA tournament previews coming your way. Also, if you are one of our United States subscribers for FloHockey, we do have select games from the SHL playoffs the rest of the way this year. So you'll want to be subscribed for that. We've got lots of games. So if you want to get a look at Axel Sandin Pellikka or some of the other top prospects playing in Sweden right now, the SHL playoffs are underway, and we have one game every day for the next week. We'll have more playoff coverage for you for the SHL. Again, that is in the U.S. only. But also, it is getting close to playoff time. Junior hockey, college hockey, obviously pro hockey as well. So many things really coming to the fore. So make sure you are subscribed to FloHockey so you can get all the access to those great leagues and certainly get fired up for this time of year. It's outstanding. And before we go, I also wanted to just say a bit of a somber note, because I just found out just before we recorded, a friend of mine who has connections to junior hockey in the U.S. Passed away recently. Really nice man, Larry Snyder. He was a former PA announcer for the Youngstown Phantoms. I co-host this podcast with Cam now. The very first podcast I think I ever did was Gospel of Hockey, which was just years ago with my pal Matt Geika and Larry Snyder. And Larry, great hockey fan, super nice man, loved junior hockey, loved college hockey as well. Did some games with Robert Morris University back in the day and broadcast. But Larry was just such a nice man, and I just wanted to send my best to all who care about him, especially my pal Matt Geika, who notified me about this. And Larry was such a nice man. So our thoughts go out to Larry and his family. And this hockey world, Cam, is so great. You meet so many great people. You might be the general manager of an NHL team, might be a fan of the lowest rung of junior hockey. It doesn't matter. We're all connected by this game that we love, and it's so great to be able to meet people. So I just want to send a very quick remembrance of Larry, who was such a nice man and was nice at a time in my career when nobody had to be nice to me. So that's always nice. They don't have to be nice to me now either, but either way. So Larry, we're thinking about you, and we will certainly miss you. But Cam, hey, it's been a fun show. We've had a lot to talk about. There's a lot more coming. Obviously, NHL draft stuff is going to be very much in the forefront here as we go forward. As we record next week, it'll be just right up against the NCAA tournament, so we won't spend a whole ton of time on it like we did today, but we will have plenty more. Hey, man, it's always fun. It's fun to do the show with you. I think it's super fun when we have topics like today with Gavin McKenna. But yeah, man, let's do this again real soon. How about that?
Let's do it. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, me too. Well, once again, want to say a quick thank you to our friends at Wonderful Pistachios for being the presenting sponsor of Called Up the Prospects podcast. I want to thank all of you for listening, and also thanks to Ever for producing today's show. We have had a blast doing it. Hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure you catch this podcast wherever you can. Download, subscribe, rate, review, do all those fun things so that we can have more of you listen to us as well. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Called Up the Prospects podcast. For Cam Robinson, I'm Chris Peters. We'll see you next time.